at each level, change would be would mean different things. So change in one variable would mean something at one level, but it would mean something else at a different level. Change in tuition means one thing for you guys, it means something else for me. Change in weather, if it's a rainy day, affects students maybe more or less than faculty, that kind of thing. They evolve and co-evolve over time. So a change in one subsystem affects another subsystem in maybe a different way, but they're affecting each other. And it's happening with a pattern of punctuated equilibriums. Yes, decorous sounds and construction. I think they're, you guys see what they're doing? They're changing out the water fountains. So it's a big operation. Punctuated equilibriums, meaning the system is stable, it's in equilibrium, and then something happens to change it, and the energy sort of shifts in one direction. I think of it that way. It's an innovation. It can be a company suddenly growing, now that we're in the economics section. It can be a mutation that happens to a species that makes that species suddenly successful, and it starts to dominate. That's a punctuation in that equilibrium that existed before. So we're sort of stepping up at each point. And you remember my diagrams before, they sort of went in and they met an equilibrium. I suppose I could have drawn that a longer equilibrium where they're discriminating, they've got a form, and then they're dissolving and going back into another form and going out like that. Conversations starting and stopping. Each equilibrium is centered around or on some attractor, some form, some sort of constellation of information and energy. A species is in a species form, or a constellation of sets of actors in an ecosystem, or in an economic system. An industrial sort of complex could be sort of an attractor. But there are nuances and innovations that happen around it, so it's always going to be changing. And they produce emergent behaviors. So there are behaviors that happen within that constellation that make sense once you have that level. Well, I mentioned sort of an industrial complex. I think of the military industrial complex. We've talked about this, I think, back in intro sociology. I think you all, I know you've all taken that with me, but you may not remember that part, which is military industry, an industry that makes things for the military itself, and the government sort of have a triumvirate sort of partnership that they're complementary relationships. And once you get that sort of system going, there are emergent behaviors that happen there to keep it going and to advantage some parties within it, some agents or actors within that. Can you think of anything that you might find yourself doing as a behavior or asking for if you're an actor in, or wishing for, if you're an actor or agent in the military industrial complex? Things that might be in your interests. There are jobs out there that you might get if you're a social, engaging person. And you know how to be charming and get people to say yes to you, and they want to be your friend, and they want to please you because you're that kind of person. I don't know, know of any jobs for people like that? Oh, they're just a likable sort. What would you go into if you were, just generally speaking, what would you go into if you were? Sales. Sales, that's right. There's such a thing as military weapons sales? Yes. You know who you sell them to? Your tank, your B-2 bomber? That's sort of dated, mentioning the B-2 bomber. That was a big controversy whether we should buy one 30 years ago or 20 years ago. Who you might be selling it to? Who buys bombers? What actors? Governments do. Governments too. So you wouldn't quite be in sales, but you might be a lobbyist, is what you might be. Lobby, you might be from the industry, lobbying government officials, or you might go the other way and maybe at the same time and lobby Pentagon officials who would request that then. Oh, you need this. Tell them you need this. That kind of thing. So those are emergent behaviors that arise once you develop that level. Okay? All right. Here's the summary continued. Okay, I'm going to get into it here. I mean it. Ready? I really mean it. And I'm almost quoting from her, Deborah Tussey at this point. These qualities, before these that we've gone over, these qualities make a system unpredictable. Unpredictable over the long term. Unpredictable because, they make them unpredictable because you don't know how things are going to evolve and co-evolve. It's too complicated with all those nested systems, those interconnected components that have to produce novelty, have to produce new forms to get that edge, to make those sort of punctures through the equilibrium so that they have an advantage. And you don't know what those emergent behaviors will be. So you can't really predict over the long run what will happen. And that means human interventions in such systems, when we intervene and we try and prevent problems from happening, or we try and improve what's happening, such systems are likely to produce problems, or she refers to it in this very common term used in academia today, not just people who are, I think this would qualify as a buzz term to some degree, unintended consequences. Unintended consequences. When we talk about design, the unintended consequences of design, because it's of such complexity. A lot of stuff in design and complexity studies, by the way. I just ran across a whole series of courses on it online. The most robust systems, okay, the systems that have strong attractors to them, it's continually sort of creating novel and diverse forms, but around this sort of constellation of information sort of patterns. It could be a language, it could be a word, it could be a species, it could be an institution. The most robust systems, it could be a country, it could be an economy, exhibit self-organizing criticality, which means that criticality, it almost means they're about to die. I mean, it means they're about to well, I don't know about to die, it's probably they're about to fall apart or something. They're sort of interacting at risk because things are not predictable. They're not sure things will stay together. It's not sure things will stay together. But they need to operate at that point of unpredictableness because that's what creates novelty. That's what gives them gradients for energy and for power, and positioning themselves at the edge of chaos is her terminology for it, but I believe other people use that. So they're exhibiting that self-organizing criticality at the edge of chaos, which is the ability to maintain a productive tension internally between order and chaos, between predictableness and unpredictableness. And I think that's key. I think that's key. And I think we need to understand where this is coming from. Where are we getting the order from? Universally, no pun intended, but in the universe, where is it coming from, that order? And where's the chaos coming from? In physics, where is order coming from? Any thoughts on that? If you throw stuff up in the air, will any order come of it? It will fall down. It'll come down to some center. If you were out in space and you threw it up in the air, you know, you've got a spaceship or, you know, out there in space, you blow it up, what'll happen to that stuff? That won't fall down. What would happen to it eventually?
Go into orbit, right?
It would go into orbit around some other big center of energy. And if there's nothing around it, it would come back together in a new way. It would, a less orderly way. It would come back together, attracted to each other. Gravitational attraction is a force there. The other fundamental forces of physics are forces of attraction. And who knows how they're related to each other? We're not sure. I asked the Jardins a few times pointedly, do we know how they sort of emerge, these different forces? No, we don't really know. Do we have a theory about that? No, we don't really have a theory about it. But there are forces that are bringing things together. And chaos I mean, eventually, if you have a spaceship up in space, what's eventually going to happen to it? I mean, eventually, it's going to sort of fall apart, right? I mean, in space, less so than here on the ground, where there's more forces sort of operating on it. You leave something out long enough, it'll pretty much dissolve, right? Long enough. Some things faster than others, of course. And so that's entropy, that's energy dissipation as well. So I'm hitting this over and over again. I mean, I see that order and chaos sort of duo, and I'm like, oh, you know, attraction, forces of attraction, and entropy. Anyone? Can we talk about that, please? Can we please pair those up, please? Anyone? Anyone out there? Hello? Anybody listening to me? Hello? I know, Dr. Demerath, please relax. Stop yelling. Like that. Cheesy end, but I wanted something that blinks, but it's not going to do that. You know, I'm really convinced that there's something there with this. This pairing comes up again and again in complexity studies. This idea that people come together, there's this sort of segregation, there's this shutting off, there's this differentiation, homogeneity, but it doesn't last long. You get bored with that. It doesn't provide much energy. After a while, you need some new blood, right? You need some new stuff. Okay, all right, yeah, okay, enough of that. Pyrotechnics. Yes, please, Dr. D. Sorry, okay, all right.
You make slides that actually say that.
I know. I guess I get bored, and you know, there I am in the living room, cat on me and stuff. Okay. Coevolution. Coevolution. I don't have any definition here. What would coevolution be? Let's define this. Y'all can define this. Let's give ourselves a nice definition for coevolution.
Together?
They're doing it together, but
simultaneously, but not
simultaneously, separately,
No.
totally separately,
Again?
probably.
totally separately.
They're not in the same exact environment.
Right, they're not. They're not speaking exactly the same language, right? They're using different sort of sets of information as they change, as they evolve. So they're separate, but they're not completely separate. That's the point, right? They're separate, but they're also related. They're independent, but not completely independent, right? They're evolving separately somewhat. Differently, somewhat. Completely predictable, internally planning themselves, able to account for themselves, somewhat, right? But also depending on those systems, those other systems. So what kind of systems might be co-evolving? What is it about these systems that would make them co-evolve versus systems that are not co-evolving? No, you got this system over here, it's evolving. And it has nothing to do with that system over there. That system's evolving completely separately. They are not co-evolving.
Animals in an ecosystem.
Yeah, animals in an ecosystem. There's something, maybe those circulation media sort of unite them, connect them. Your parts of your body, are they sort of co-evolving, co-changing? Have you encountered how a part of your body is changing in one way and another part of your body will change in response in another way? Anybody been injured lately, by the way? Anything like that? You ever had anything like that, Maddie? As I stretch my tendonitis?
Yeah.
Yeah. And you develop a problem on one and then you suddenly got a problem on the other foot or something like that. There was a math professor at seminary eons ago, when I first came here 18 years ago. She was from Turkey, not that this matters or anything, had an accent, attractive woman, not especially nerdy, but she was a math professor. Did I already say that? Okay. She ran all the time. She was a runner, big runner. You'd see her running all the time. She ran with a limp all the time, and I don't think she realized she was limping. I think she had a hurt leg, and she was sort of countering it, but didn't realize, hey, we can see you're trying to counter your gait. I've got tendonitis I could show you, but I've got bumps they're right on the kneecaps, right on top of the kneecaps. I could show you. They're hard bumps, right on top of the kneecaps. It's where the tendon attaches from is this the tibia, is that what that is? Attaches from the tibia to the top of the patella, and it's big bumps there. And I think it's because of chronic tendonitis or loose tendons, because I dislocated a kneecap once, and the doctor once said, yeah, you've got loose patella tendons. That's why that would happen to somebody like you. And maybe this sort of strengthened the tendon over time by raising the tendon or something. There's some sort of countering system so that this is co-evolving, with other parts of the body. I don't know if any of that helps y'all, but this is what happens. Does centenary co-evolve with, say, the economy of Shreveport? It's going to have effects, right? People, whether they can afford the tuition or something like that. All sorts of ways we can find this related. Okay. Example from the reading. Well, they talked about free trade. And they talked about how opening up trade might make manufacturing jobs scarcer in more developed economies. It's good for the manufacturing job in lesser developed countries, not so good for those in the developed countries. And so there's a way in which those two kinds of systems are changing together. But as those increase in manufacturing, they can become more evenly distributed later on. Okay, that soccer team's fan club page. Okay, I'm going to hit you with this sort of example here. I'm going to give you some graphics, so get ready. Okay, for some weird diagrams again. Though it's the same weirdness, so hopefully it's lessening with happening. If you set up a fan page for that new professional soccer team in Shreveport, if my son does that, and if it begins to be successful, if it begins to be successful, how might it be drawing off of the success of other pages, other links? Might he, for example, want to link it to other websites that are successful, maybe are more substantial? And if he can get a link to that more established site and then some others, he might become more successful, and that might diversify what he is, and it might become not just the soccer team's fan page, but say the local pro sports team's fan page, and then become successful because of those sorts of partnerships. And sort of co-evolving or using those other systems to evolve. Okay, so here's this image that we had before, where this is the soccer team in effect, and you're seeing information orders, energy orders. Hey, I want to go there because there's a lot of stuff there. I want to see that. Professional publications, the team's website or something like that. gee, if they link to fans publishing patterns, right, their websites, the patterns noted by fans are more easily drawn in. And there's more of a centrifugal sort of force because they know where they can go to get that stuff. Becomes sort of more concentrated. That could become, those publishing patterns, those tweets, those Facebook posts or something like that, could become a punctuated equilibrium, something that becomes its own thing, its own. So your posts on your Facebook page suddenly become, hey, that's going to be its own. I'm going to make a Facebook page just for the fans of the team, and that becomes its own thing. And that could be a punctuated equilibrium if, well, certain things happen. You can imagine it maybe not taking off. So it needs meaningfulness. It needs well, it needs frequency of posts. It needs stable posts. It needs impactful posts. So the patterns have to be meaningfully published. Again, you got to do it consistently. You've got to do it in a way that people understand, that's nicely stable and defined. And you have to have impact to those posts. They have to be connected to other things that are meaningful. Maybe other people, you have other people like them. Right? And so you situate it in a network of meaning. And that's how it would become more meaningful. And so here we are doing here. So there you get that little sort of barnacle on the side of the soccer team sort of universe, right? And that becomes its own thing. So new orders grow due to relationships with other orders, is what I'm trying to show here. And that would be an example. It would draw in from other things, right? Maybe if you can get it cited by the newspaper, by the city's newspaper, and happens to mention it, or they put it on their site. And maybe the soccer coaches at the league recommend it to all of their players, right? All their kids who take soccer at Cabosa, which is the Shreveport League. They mention that, and it becomes more meaningful that way. So it links to the newspaper, it links to that recreational league. And so you're bringing in orders, drawing from the energy of those orders to make your barnacle more meaningful. But it could die without, well, again, those consistent, networked and frequent sort of iterations, posts. All right. This is, I'm trying to sort of communicate how things build out of these sort of layers of peripheral relationships where you have novelty becoming more improvised but more consistent, and then drawing in from other sort of communities and other publications in this case, other websites it could be. But they don't have to succeed. They can die. If people aren't interested in them, right? They're not important enough. The stability, if they're not well done, if they're not aesthetically done, and all of this is important. We talked about aesthetic perception beforehand and about how important that is for drawing people's interest. Okay. Well, all right. Any questions on that? Do you see sort of what I'm getting at there? Sort of the more meaningful communities you can draw from, the better. It gives you more legitimacy. And I want to talk about dogs, microbes, and things like that. I mean, the species of dog that has the most extensive microbial system you want to draw in, right? And maybe mutts are better for that. You know, maybe they've got more extensive sort of immune systems built into them. So we talked about sort of the mutt personality earlier. Okay, so let's get sort of to this last issue here, self-organizing around critical points, criticality, life at the edge. This is that tension between life and death in a sense, or overly controlled stuff. So systems can't be overly controlled, rigidly controlled. And they can't be anarchic either. All right, so let's think of some examples of rigidly controlled systems. A system or something that's overly controlled. That's no fun because it's so controlled. Yeah, I could go on and on about this because I'm sort of an anarchy guy, I think. But, is there anything in your life or anything like that you don't like because that person sort of hyper controls it, or it's so rigid. It doesn't really work for me. I like a little more sort of freedom and play. You know what I mean? I want more room for my own creativity.
I don't like actively avoid things that are rigid, so no.
Oh, so you know to look out for that stuff? Well, you're sitting in here, Wes, listening to me drone on and on.
It's true.
Yeah. It's all right. It's because once in a while Demerath stops talking and lets us talk, right? I mean, I do. I've given out assignments that I know are, well, both, I think mine are usually too anarchic. They're sort of too open. But you've probably had the reverse where the assignments are too controlled and rigid and sort of fill in the blank stuff. They're no fun either. What about cooking, DG? Do you use recipes? Or would you rather sort of know the rough elements and then be able to just sort of improvise a little bit?
You guys can go out and find use measurements?
Well, I guess it depends, right? What you're making.
I mean, I just kind of go with the flow. I don't really use like let's say recipes or anything.
You said you make hot water cornbread.
Mm-hmm.
Do you need recipes for that? Or can you make that just sort of by feel?
Yeah, it's just
Yeah?
cornmeal.
But she's saying, yeah, of course I can. Can't everybody do that? No, I cannot do that. I can with pancake mix, though. I don't make pancake mix. Back, know that. Back
Every dad can make pancakes.
That's right. It's a dad's obligation. I know, it's true. No, but I like cooking recipes that I'm more familiar with, and it allows me to improvise a little bit more. I guess that's sort of what I'm getting at. But also, school, education. Man, I didn't like school until I was doing my own thing with school. Until it was my dissertation. I loved it at my dissertation. I increasingly liked it as I got better at it, I guess, and as you get more sort of freedom with doing what you want to do. See, what's that?
Yeah, I agree.
What'd she say?
I mean, she doesn't want to tell you.
Okay, then fine. Fine. But this is the play, okay? This is that tension, right? You need a framework, but too much of one, and it sucks all the fun out of it, right? Sucks all the fun out of it. Centralized communist systems are economies that are so controlled. There's little room for innovation, improvisation on the part of the individual agents. And so freedom is something that they complain about, right? That's sort of thirsted for. But by gosh, they have a meaningful role. They have work to do. Everybody is given work to do. Here, that's sort of the risk. You might not be given work to do. You might not have a meaningful role. Social workers, if you got a good social worker, they should be able to find you one. That's how we sort of countered that. But nor anarchy, no order at all, like laissez-faire economies. Oh, let them do whatever they want. Economic actors, workers, capitalists, they'll find each other out. They'll find the higher paying companies will find the better paying, working workers, and they'll be justly rewarded accordingly. And people will take care of themselves. Right? They don't need much regulation. What are some of the things that might happen, though, in a laissez-faire economy?
Negative externalities.
Like?
Pollution.
So negative
worker
outcomes like?
Yeah.
Yep.
Worker
Yeah, worker abuse, or, that's right.
stuff.
No, I mean, we wouldn't tell you if there's asbestos in these ceiling tiles if we didn't have to. Who was just caught cheating on their emissions? What car company?
Mercedes.
It was Volkswagen first, right?
Yeah.
They just on the news yesterday.
Well, it came out that everyone was cheating on that. Like, Toyota got caught too.
Oh, really? Did they? Oh,
And
no.
everybody found the bug in the emissions testing.
Okay.
software.
Well, they just found Porsche the other day.
Yeah.
Porsche.
Several companies have cheated on it.
Yeah.
I don't blame them.
What?
I don't care.
Really?
I'd do the same thing.
You would destroy the environment for your private profit?
If you ain't cheating, you ain't trying, and I mean, money's money. You gotta make it any way you can.
Okay. But you wouldn't argue that there would be nobody trying to stop you from cheating?
I mean, yeah, there are buzzkills in the world. That's just how it goes. You know, you gotta.
Okay. Okay. All right. So Wes is, I think, arguing.
The honor code exists theoretically everywhere. You know, you just kind of
Okay.
gotta avoid it.
Wes, is everybody thought like you? We would live in a fucked up society.
I mean, we do, but
No, way worse.
Yeah.
everybody does think like me.
No, they don't.
Everybody's
No,
out for
they don't.
themselves. That's why capitalism is so successful, because the only society that you can really, the only way that you can expect people to act is in their own self-interest. So creating
Alright.
a society based on that concept is the
Okay,
only
and
reasonable
let's
thing.
move on.
Well, I mean, but Wes, you're not arguing that we do this now. We don't
No,
have
no,
this
there's
now.
plenty of intervention.
There's plenty of intervention, plenty of regulation.
That's a good thing.
And I think the only way Wes can sort of sanely argue this is because he's acknowledging there are regulators who are going to regulate me. I'm supposed to try as hard as I can, but they're supposed to try as hard as they can to stop me. Now, I think, you know, some of us might wonder, well, if you know they're not going to stop you, if you know you're getting away with it and you're hurting
Do it.
the world,
It's not hurting.
okay, well, it's pollution, I mean, okay, just a little bit. So, he'll be here all week, only $20 a show, and, okay, but you gotta have a balance between this. I'm sure this is what Wes is arguing, really, that you gotta have some regulation along with some opportunity to innovate.
Cheaters.
Mm-hmm. If he's not, he's gonna deal with that. And why do you need that balance? Well, why couldn't you be all one or the other? Let's refresh our memories. Why couldn't you be all, you know, control or all anarchy? Why couldn't you be all free reign?
Can't trust people. You can't trust people to run things hyper efficiently in an effective manner, and you can't trust people to be moral whenever they're given free rein to do whatever they want. So that's why there has to be a balance.
Uh-huh. And people will, I do think that's pretty much why we keep people from putting sawdust in the flour. I mean, that's what they used to do. Yeah. When there's private profit to be made, people will often cheat. Yeah, that's true. Could you do this though? Could you then just take total control? So we're going to make it so that there's no opportunities for pollution,
Well,
for hurting people. What would be the problem with that kind of economy? What is the problem with those kinds of
There's
economies?
no innovations.
There's no innovations, right? So we've got it all figured out. We know all the answers. We know the kind of cars that you need.
also
We know
there's-
the kind of beer that you want.
There's no way to have perfect oversight over everyone to ensure that everyone's following the rules. So you can't really have a perfectly centralized control government or system, because there's no way to monitor every interaction to ensure that your system is perfectly
Yeah.
controlled.
It's unpredictable, right? You can't know all the moving parts. So things are going to be coming up that you didn't anticipate? Yeah, you need innovation on the one hand, but you need constraints on the other. Yeah, I hadn't anticipated the radical let me pollute sort of attitude, but
Not totally pollute,
just enough to have fun, right?
not fun.
Profit, sorry, private profit.
Recycling's a sham.
Uh-huh.
Costs more money to recycle than it doesn't. Doesn't make any sense.
Sometimes it's true.
It doesn't make any sense.
Not always true. I don't believe. So this could be attraction and dissipation happening here through circulation. This is the same thing that we saw before, where you get a tree shedding leaves there, it's circulated around, and there's balance here between death, or decay, and life and emerging order. And there's balance between companies dying, people investing. Go ahead, take your risk, right? Buy that car, see if it won't get sued and won't have any problems later. See if you can get parts from them later. Go ahead, take your risk. Or buy the car over here that's made by the company that has the seal of government approval that says it's met all the requirements, and see, maybe you trust that one a little further. There's choices involved, and the government is sort of the circulation medium. How much does it constrain that? Okay, your assignment, this is your assignment, y'all, at this point, is for the next week, as we go through this, so a week from today, I'd like you to send me a copy of your notes on how any of these concepts relate to your research topic. So you can be writing this in your notepad, right, in your notebook, and keeping it for your research paper that's coming, your thoughts on this, on how any of these concepts relate. So where has there been emergence in your field of study? How might differentiation be occurring, or how has it occurred? Punctuated equilibria. There's more than one, but several punctuated equilibria have happened. Nonlinearity. How is a change at one point reflected differently at other levels? How has entropy or attraction been involved? Those forces, however you want to call those, you can use your own terms if you like, but at least make reference to something like that. I talk about simplification, information being simplified, data being compressed, coarse graining, we've also talked about, and discrimination, segregation, bordering, setting, subsystems creating borders and sort of membranes and boundaries, exploiting the information that they have, and then exploration on the other hand. And there's a big thing with exploration and exploitation Suarez and I have been talking about as we get ready for this. Just only now getting to the economics part. But
how long do you want a research paper to do?
Well, that's a different question. I think I've said before, what did I say? Did I say 10 pages, I believe?
That's about it. That's cool. That's easy.
But that's in writing somewhere. So whatever's in writing is what I'm going to stick with. So which of these concepts have been helpful, and which are inapplicable, you think, or incomprehensible? If you think any of them are you don't understand how they relate at all, how anything like that relates to your topic, you better talk to me. Let me know what problems you're having making those sort of connections. Think about that. Okay? You might be able to figure out if at first you don't, if you don't get it. Any questions on this?
So this is due Thursday or next Tuesday?
Next Tuesday, week from today. Week from today.
Are you still updating the directory?
Right, so you're going to point Raquel to this, yeah, or whoever, right? Yeah, I'll have this all up there, yeah, for any of you guys, right? Raquel and Darielle aren't here today, but yeah, I'll upload this. These slides will be up there, okay? All right, okay, let's move on. Let's go to objectives for our first economics class, and then we're just getting into it now in the last 15 minutes here, and I really wanted to finish up that review. Where does economics fit in the linear versus complexity space? I've already sort of outlined these. What are the underlying assumptions of the reigning economic paradigm? And then reviewing what we've learned about complexity and linearity already. So in his initial class, his class for us, first off, we actually do some of what we just did. So we're going to jump into it now. Okay. All right, so modeling atoms with neoclassical economics. What he's doing here is showing us, Suarez wants us to see how economics traditionally has been, okay? And you're seeing individuals as like little atoms, everything's sort of equal in the economic universe. And the individual is an exogenous entity. There's nothing going to it, there's nothing sort of causing it. It is independent. Okay? It's an independent actor. Society, which might be causing the individual actor to like what she likes, or not like what she likes, or pay that much more for this or that, does not exist. So they're not analyzing that sort of context. Where do people exist within other systems, other levels? Where are they getting their preferences from? All behavior is the product of current agents, right? So it's a static sort of system. And the utility function, how much things are sort of liked or preferred, represents the individual and is a set of her preferences and is reflected in her buying behavior. Negative feedback, this is the last one really, is everything is marginally decreasing. Everything is marginally decreasing.
Law of diminishing marginal utility.
The law of what?
Diminishing marginal utility.
The law of diminishing marginal utility, that's right. This is traditional economics. So this will look familiar to a lot of you who've had it before. Sorry, you want to finish up on that, anybody? Or you got that? So that's actually the next slide about that, just briefly. Marginally decreasing utility. The more you have of something, the less you get out of it. Sorry, Dante, that's my mistake, not yours. I was trying to correct something and I mucked it up. The utility of money, right? And you can graph income by the utility of income. All right, so let's see if I have a marker in here, I don't think. Right. So the more income you have, right, as income goes out here, and here's the utility of it, the less sort of good it is to you. So it goes down like that. It's progressively less sort of useful. Cooks in a kitchen. Too many cooks spoil the broth. You guys know you don't need that many. Production from a piece of land. If you have lots and lots of land, you'll get less production from it per acre, per parcel. And so that's the traditional paradigm of neoclassical economics, says that the more capital a country has, the less productive it will be. Yeah, Wes.
Okay, utility money thing, is that what the econ professor that we're going to hear about, he say that? Because it's not really applicable, in my opinion, because whenever you look at utility models, you look at like marginal utility per dollar, the amount of money you have is just like, it increases your utility in the difference curve modeling, like, because that makes your budget line like outwardly shift. And you have the capability to reach a higher level of utility whenever you're buying goods. So
Because you can increase your capacity, and is the economy of scale increasing?
I don't think that money is a really good example. I mean,
maybe. Well, this is income. He said income. So this is maybe this is household income he's talking about.
okay.
I think that's what he means, because I know income is what he meant. Income versus by utility of income. So I think it's by household. Right. household income. And that would make sense to me. I hear what you're saying, right? I mean, yeah, the bigger the company, the more money it has, the more it can produce, yeah. I believe. Corollary is countries will tend towards equilibrium with the same amount of wealth. Okay, so eventually countries will have the same amount of wealth. Okay? Eventually, people become equal. All right, let me show you. I think this is the one. Should I do it? No, I guess not yet. Okay. Marginally decreasing productivity of capital, a negative feedback loop. In the long run, all countries will be just as wealthy. Yeah, this is repeating basically what we had. Okay, so here's where we watch Hans Rosling. Okay, he says, look at the final arrow that shows that all countries will tend towards being healthy and wealthy. What implicit assumption is made here about how economies and countries grow? Okay.
Visualization is right at the heart of my own work too. I teach global health. And I know having the data is not enough. I have to show it in ways people both enjoy and understand. Now, I'm going to try something I've never done before. Animating the data in real space, with a bit of technical assistance from the crew. So, here we go. First, an axis for health. Life expectancy, from 25 years to 75 years. And down here, an axis for wealth, income per person, $400,000, $4,000, and $40,000. So down here is poor and sick, and up here is rich and healthy. Now, I'm going to show you the world 200 years ago, in 1810. Here come all the countries. Europe brown, Asia red, Middle East green, Africa south of Sahara blue, and the Americas yellow. And the size of the country bubbles show the size of the population. And in 1810, it was pretty crowded down there, wasn't it? All countries were sick and poor. Life expectancy were below 40 in all countries. And only the UK and the Netherlands were slightly better off, but not much. And now, why start the world? The Industrial Revolution makes countries in Europe and elsewhere move away from the rest. But the colonized countries in Asia and Africa, they are stuck down there. And eventually, the Western countries get healthier and healthier. And now, we slow down to show the impact of the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic. What a catastrophe! And now I speed up through the 1920s and the 1930s. And in spite of the Great Depression, Western countries forge on towards greater wealth and health. Japan and some others try to follow, but most countries stay down here. Now, after the tragedies of the Second World War, we stop a bit to look at the world in 1948. 1948 was a great year. The war was over, Sweden topped the medal table at the Winter Olympics, and I was born. But the difference between the countries of the world was wider than ever. United States was in the front, Japan was catching up. Brazil was way behind, Iran was getting a little richer from oil, but still had short lives. And the Asian giants, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh and Indonesia, they were still poor and sick down here. But look what is about to happen. Here we go again. In my lifetime, former colonies gained independence, and then finally they started to get healthier and healthier and healthier. And in the 1970s, then countries in Asia and Latin America started to catch up with the Western countries. They became the emerging economies. Some in Africa follows. Some Africans were stuck in civil war and others hit by HIV. And now we can see the world today in the most up-to-date statistics. Most people today live in the middle, but there are huge differences at the same time between the best of countries and the worst of countries. And there are also huge inequalities within countries. These bubbles show country averages, but I can split them. Take China, I can split it into provinces. There goes Shanghai. It has the same wealth and health as Italy today. And there is the poor inland province Guizhou. It is like Pakistan. And if I split it further, the rural parts are like Ghana in Africa. And yet, despite the enormous disparities today, we have seen 200 years of remarkable progress. That huge historical gap between the West and the rest is now closing. We have become an entirely new converging world. And I see a clear trend into the future. With aid, trade, green technology and peace, it's fully possible that everyone can make it to the healthy, wealthy corner. Well, what you just seen in the last few minutes is a story of 200 countries shown over 200 years and beyond. It involves plotting of 120,000 numbers. Pretty neat, huh?
Yeah, well.
Hate to be
Okay,
bad,
Hans.
Sue, but how to do that.
They're probably gonna hit me with another thing, don't do that. Okay, guys, Suarez does not agree with that. And he says that's one of the big differences between complexity economists, basically, and traditional economists. This is a traditional economist, Gosling is in his book. Okay? Oh, geez, I was supposed to come up one at a time. Yeah, Dante doesn't use custom animation necessarily. I'll blame him. I'll blame you, Dante. Okay, so, but he says, so he does not agree, my colleague, Dr. Suarez. He says there are now economists like him that think like sociologists who account for society and utility functions that are different. Linear models are seen as just a subset of nonlinear models, which means you can go into one time period or one level, and yeah, it's going to be linear there. But as you go out of that, it's going to change. He's very fond of saying accidents matter. Innovations that happen can reverberate and can make a system get into a situation that may be unhealthy and may lead to unhealthy inequality. Like the Vikings being very good at pastoral, herding, I suppose, or something like that. They get into technological lockdown, and they're going to make that work no matter what, and it can kill them. Or very high inequality that's not necessarily good for the whole of society. Good for that elite, sure, but not good for the whole of society. He says agents are interrelated, as we've been talking about. So solutions to the system, to understanding how these things go from one level to another level to another level. Those solutions are very complex, figuring all that out, how that happens. The way to do it, the shortest explanation to come up with is to understand the algorithm, which is basically the basic process that happens. How do you sort of program the initial agents? What are the rules at the beginning which lead to atoms becoming molecules, becoming cells, becoming organisms, becoming humans with consciousness, becoming families, becoming governments, becoming, etc. And emergence is where the whole does not equal the sum of the parts. And one of the principles of traditional economics, I guess we didn't see that, I guess I took that out, where it was that the whole does equal the sum of the parts. You just sum them all up, and you can understand the whole economy by understanding a single actor, but here you can't, because it depends on what level you're talking about, what level they're at. I think this is understanding how one agent here, the principles there in that algorithm lead to this. I'm not sure what he meant by that diagram. I have to admit. Okay. Let's shift Dr. Suarez's slides. Well, all right. Just hang with me here, okay? I know work is just about done, but don't you want to see his face? Don't you want to see Dante's face before we go? We'll continue this, but there he is. There's Dr. Suarez. Now I know. See, I was going to make a point with this. At this level, at the professional level of interaction, that's a very typical picture, right? That's the kind of interaction that has been stabilized there and that people understand. It's aesthetically pleasing because it meets expectations. That's really what he looks like. That's the Dante I know, smiling guy. That could be outside his apartment in Tokyo, though I doubt that. He's on sabbatical now, as you know. Maybe that's in San Antonio where he's from. So we'll talk more about Dante's perspective on economics and how Rosling, he thinks, is wrong. And we're not all going to become more wealthy.
I agree.
Yeah. Okay, thanks guys. Unless you go to church or something, then you can
If you expect all people to be shitty, you'll never be disappointed, only pleasantly surprised.
Well, have fun out there living in the forest alone.